Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to this installment of my Tarot and Oracle and Lenormand, just my deck collection and my Declutter series. So I'm not doing a ton of decluttering. I keep saying that. Last video I feel like I got rid of a couple, but today we're going to be talking about my angels and my fairy, my angel and fairy decks. So a bit of a mix up here. We'll see how it comes out. I'm loving this like fairy fabric. I think I might see if Peggy wants to make these into little mini reading cloths, but they're really pretty. Okay, anyway, let me get back on track. So let's dive in to the first deck we're going to be talking about today. So this is my Froud Fairies Oracle, and I have had a tricky relationship with this deck. I've had it for a very, very long time. But for a long time, and I do have these mixed up with upright and reversed because the book that comes with it gives you upright and reversed meanings, and it works really well that way. For a long time I had this deck on the back burner and I just did not feel called to work with it. I don't know why. I talk about this a little bit more if you look up my weekly deck review where I talk about my last experience with this deck, pairing it with the Tarot of the She. It is absolutely an outstanding deck, and it has a lot of depth to it, a lot of magic in it as well. You can tell that Froud and oh gosh, I forget the other author that he worked with on this deck off the top of my head, but you can tell they really, you know, believe in the wildness of the Fae. They believe in the magic of the Fae, and it really comes through in the book and the way these cards are represented. Froud's been making fairy art for a long time. And this was my very first Oracle deck, actually, that I think I ever owned. I'd gotten it in a witchy shop, and I just was really drawn to its magic. And I feel like this year I really reconnected with the magic of this deck, and I'm so, so glad that I wasn't too hasty about rehoming it, because I definitely did think about it for a while. But that's one of the reasons why I try to be kind of slow and deliberate about deciding what's going to leave my collection, because oftentimes I will change my mind, and then, you know, you might end up having to recollect a deck that you've rehomed if you're too hasty, right? But this one, I love, love, love it, and it pairs so well with the Tarot of the She, which I might as well talk about next. But this one is definitely staying in my collection, especially for the time being. Oh my gosh. Okay. The Tarot of the She, oh my gosh, this has become a fast favorite for me. For starters, I did edge and trim and edge this deck, and I'm so pleased with how it turned out. I trimmed the sides off, but I also took a bit off the top and the bottom, and I really like the effect. I used a larger corner rounder on it just to soften it a bit. This is, this is what I think a fairy deck should be. I know that sounds really snobby, and I'm really sorry, but it's just personal taste, right? But for me, the Fae is very wild and full of abandon. There's a lot of empowerment in this deck. It's a very, it's a wonderful deck for connecting with your wild nature. It's a wonderful deck for, I don't know, it's very, it doesn't feel like it boxes me in, which I actually thought this would be kind of a niche deck, you know, one that you'd pull out for certain types of situations. But for reading for myself, I feel like I could read about any topic with this deck and get a really, really meaningful and helpful read. It really blew me away. This was a deck that I actually considered in my Say Yes to the Deck series, and it took me 2 different times having it on my potential wish list in a Say Yes to the Deck before I finally scooped it up. And I absolutely love this deck so much. And again, it paired so beautifully with Froud's Fairies Oracle. It's so good. This is hands down my favorite fairy tarot deck that I've ever encountered. So, or Fae tarot deck, I should say, that I've ever encountered. Love, 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 love it. Okay, let's look at another fairy deck. So this one is the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. This was one of the first times I ever tried edging a deck with ink, and I had thought I had picked a more golden color, but I'd actually picked a copper. So the sides are a little bit out of place with the fronts, but I still really like it. And also this took forever to dry because I didn't know with ink pads that you really should, like, after you edge them, you should wipe them down. You can actually see the edging has faded in a couple of spots, but that's okay. So the Tarot of the Hidden Realm is a mass market deck, and I believe the guidebook is written by Barbara Moore, and this particular guidebook is written in this really cool narrative style that sort of describes the scenes you see here. Now these Fae are definitely more human in their appearance, but there is a lot of emotion and up close intensity to this deck. It's a very intimate experience and a very, very good at looking into sort of emotion and thought. Because it's so close and so intimate, it really is good at that type of reading. I haven't worked with this one a lot lately, but this is one of my favorite autumn decks. I just really love its energy for that time of year, summer and autumn, I would say. But it is really, really beautiful, and it's super unique. I don't think there's any other tarot deck I've seen that has this sort of up close and personal viewpoint, and it just makes it really special. Also, I love the aces, and I normally have like a bit of a beef with like one card out of every minor arcana being like an animal, but it really works in this deck. Look at the hedgehog for the Ace of Pentacles. He's the cutest. I should be holding the cards up closer. I'm sorry. Hopefully you're still seeing them okay. Really beautiful. It's got that kind of glossy, thinner Llewellyn cardstock, but it still shuffles really well. And there is, like I said, a lot of depth, and you really do have to read the guidebook to fully appreciate this deck, because I feel like it just really brings you right into the scene of the card and makes it really real. This would also be an amazing deck for pathworking, because you can really get some intimate details, like pathworking in the sense of having a conversation in a way, like meditating about or traveling to this scene and having a conversation with the character or characters you see there, because they become, I think, very 3D in a way working with this deck. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Again, that's the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, and I'm pretty sure that is still available. I will have links to all these decks down below, I guess insofar as they're still in stock, but there we go. So this is the Fairy deck I've had the longest, at least a version of it. I used to have the bordered version. I traded it for a borderless version, which I do much prefer. This is the Mystic Fairy Tarot. This guidebook was also written by Barbara Moore. The deck, I know the creator of the deck's name, and I'm just spacing on it right at this moment. This is edged in a really pretty matching soft, I guess, I don't know what color you would call that, but I happen to have a color that was like an exact match. So it's beautifully edged in a matching shade. This is more like the Fairy deck, or the Fairy art, I guess, that I think is more common. It's very sweet, it's very sort of light and bright and almost childlike. These fairies are very accessible and approachable and gentle. It was a very nurturing and healing deck at a time when I really wanted something softer. What's really neat about this deck, particularly if you're new to tarot, is that the minor arcana, each suit tells a little story, and it takes the same characters through a particular situation, right? Usually with a bit of conflict and some resolution, and so it can be a really great way to learn what each of the cards kind of represents, and it's unique like that. As much as I don't find myself reaching for this deck often, or even really at all over the past little bit, I also don't know if it's one I could ever bring myself to part with, because this was a deck that I have had in my possession for a great many years. Like this specific one, obviously not, because I used to have the bordered version. I love the new borderless version even more. The borders on the old version that I had were really distracting to me. But yeah, so that is the Mystic Fairy Tarot. Really beautiful. Again, I'm pretty sure this one is still available, but I can't be 100% certain. This deck is one that has kind of been retired off and on in my collection. I really want to revisit it because it is so stunningly beautiful. But this is the Shadowscapes Tarot by, I think it's Stephanie Pumin Law. Her artwork is absolutely breathtaking. The biggest beef that I and so many people have with this deck is that the cards are just too small, and the detail in the artwork is there's so many details, and it's so fine with the like line work and stuff that it can be really difficult to focus on what's happening in the card, because there's just so many details and you can't really see them very well, but they're so pretty. This was actually a Mother's Day gift from my boys. So I love it. Are you okay, honey? She had to like climb behind me, so I'm taking up so much space.
You're awkward girl.
Awkward. Anyways, this is really pretty. I often kind of retire it, but I really want to pull it out.
Pretty. I'm going to awkwardly move around you one more time.
Okay, she's climbing behind me again, guys. So that is the Shadowscapes Tarot.
I'm behaving. Isn't that weird?
Good job. Bye, honey. Anyway, because it was a Mother's Day gift, and it's the only tarot deck I think my kids have ever gifted me. It was like the only time I think I ever asked for a gift of a deck, but it's very special for that regardless. I do want to revisit it because it's absolutely stunning. And I feel like I've almost judged it too harshly, so we'll see. So next up, I think the rest of these are angel-related decks. So the first of these, actually I'm going to start here. This is the Art of Love Tarot. This is a Blue Angel deck by Tony Carmine Salerno. Absolutely stunning deck. I really love it. Even with all of the angels throughout this deck, I find that it's really gentle and loving. And I absolutely love this artwork. I don't know how to describe it. It pulls me right in, and it just makes me feel safe. And I think this is an absolutely wonderful deck to read for, particularly for difficult things where you really need that sort of you want to have your hand held in a way, right? It's very soft. There's a lot of love in this deck, as it's called, so it's really wonderful for sort of love and romance readings. It's got a lot of, again, softness to it, but it reads intuitively, I think, really, really beautifully. And I love the like titles on the cards, and I find that the artwork works really well for all the images. I don't know that I would ever trim this deck. I've thought about it, but I think I like the way the artwork is framed, and I love the extra keywords and things. I really enjoy this deck. And the one thing that you'll find about Tony Carmine Salerno decks is that there is repeated artwork through the different decks, which can be jarring, but for some reason, and I've got 3 Tony Carmine Salerno decks, but for some reason I don't find that overly like jarring. And most of the time, if artwork is selected and then applied to a deck after the fact, I don't jive with it as well. But here's a really good example. So but that doesn't seem to happen for me with the Tony Carmine Salerno decks. That's what I was gonna say. Anyway, so this is another Tony Carmine Salerno. This is the Ask an Angel Oracle. And I really, really love this one too. I love pairing this one with the Art of Love Tarot. It just pairs with it really beautifully. I think that in reality, this is not a deck that I feel called to work with very much. And if I'm being completely honest, I mean, I love the matte cardstock here. I'm not sure how much work I really want to do with angels in a more serious way. And I feel like this deck is just not going to see quite enough love from me because of that. And I do have another Tony Carmine Salerno deck that has a lot of the same artwork that I think I like a little bit better, and it's a little bit less angel-y. So I think this is one that I would actually consider rehoming. It does have a really nice guidebook with it as well. So I'm going to put this in the possible to rehome pile. And let's take a look at another deck that I think this one is really special. I love this one. I use this one in almost every single past life reading that I do. And this is the Angels and Ancestors Oracle by Kyle Gray. Artwork is by Lily Moses. Really beautiful invocation in the inside of the box, which I think is really cool. I etched this with a gold paint marker, and I think it just works so well with these cards. This is such a wonderful deck. It's got angels, yes, but they feel more, for lack of a better way to express it, non-denominational. They don't necessarily feel specifically Christian, but they don't necessarily feel specifically pagan, right? So here's a Magic Guardian. This could be pagan, but it's also very angelic. So it feels, this card feels like it could be non-denominational, right? I don't know how else to describe it. This is such a great deck for working with ancestor magic, for doing any kind of, I don't know, I've used this in so many ways. So I love it for past life readings, but I've also used like the fire, air, earth, air, water, and spirit guardians to sort of set a bit of a circle on my reading table when I want to do magical work as a placeholder for that element. So there's a bunch of really cool ways to work with this deck. I think it's very well thought out, and the messages in the guidebook are really great, but I just love this artwork. The cardstock is absolutely beautiful. It's like matte, thick. It feels really lovely, and yet it's still flexible enough to shuffle well, and I just love it. So that is the Angels and Ancestors Oracle cards by Kyle Gray. All right, and we have one last deck. That one's definitely not leaving my collection. One last deck, and this is a very big favorite. You've probably heard me talk about it before. It's very angel-y, but it's just so unique and special. I love it so, so much. This is what I call my bedtime deck. But this is the Guardian Angel Tarot. This was originally a Doreen Virtue and Radley Valentine deck. Now it is just a Radley Valentine deck. It may be out of print. I feel like when I was looking for it recently, it looked like it wasn't available anymore. I followed a Dawn Michelle at Boho Tarot mod video to modify this deck, and I absolutely love how it turned out. So I trimmed the gilding off, just enough to take the gilding off pretty much, and then I re-edged it in these really pretty soft pastel colors to match the fronts. This deck is so comforting and so gentle. I keep it in a little drawer unit by my bed, and most nights before I go to sleep, I will shuffle and draw a card, read the message, and just kind of reflect on my day before I go to bed. And I just love working with it that way. If I want just a quick, easy self-care style reading, this is like the first deck I grab, because the messages are really loving and gentle. And I don't feel like I need to exercise my intuition, if that makes any sense. I can just work with the card, read the message, and then move along. And it just works so well that way. I actually barely noticed the artwork, and I think that's almost a good thing in this deck. It's like the artwork doesn't distract from the words, but the words and the artwork sort of create a cohesive experience. It's really hard to describe. And this would have been the kind of deck that it would have been the very last thing I ever would have thought I would have purchased. But I think I found out about it on Dawn Michelle's channel, and it just kept intriguing me, and so I eventually picked it up, and I'm so, so glad I did. It's one of my very favorite decks for just reading for myself. I can't see myself ever reading for somebody else with this deck. And the expanded messages in the guidebook are also really lovely. Yes, there is mention of heaven and of angels and things like that, but I don't know why. Normally that would be a big turnoff for me, but it's just not with this deck. I love it so much. Okay, so those are all of my angel and fairy decks, unless I've managed to miss one. I don't think I have. I am going to be keeping everything in this pile, but I think I am going to go ahead and rehome my Ask an Angel Oracle. I don't think this necessarily has a place in my collection right now. I don't think it's something that I'm super excited about. It does aesthetically go really well with my other Toni Carmine Salerno decks, but I just don't think I need it. And I do want to whittle a few things down out of my collection. So I am going to put this in my pile to consider rehoming, and I will keep you guys posted. So please let me know your thoughts on these decks down below. I'm super curious to hear what you think. Remember to like, share, subscribe, do all those good things. And if you would like to book a tarot reading with me, you can do that over at supportivetarot.com. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.